Welcome to the Horror Interview Show. I'm Skullface. Today I'm interviewing Karen Lam about creating the horror film, The Curse of Willow Song. How did you come up with the plot of this movie?
I actually was very inspired because I came up with the character of Willow first, and I actually was in the Portland Women's Correction Institute, basically, where I was filming female inmates learning how to do firefighting, and that's where Willow came up because she is actually she's an ex-convict who's actually on parole, and that's where it started from. I came up with my creature next and location sort of thing, and so the creature was based on some drawings that a friend of mine had done, and also I love the Dead Files, so I forgot to mention that. I've talked about it a little bit, but Dead Files has basically I was really inspired by telekinesis. You know, the idea that it's not just that Carrie being able to move things, but that you can actually, if you have this ability, it's a psychokinesis thing where you can actually create creatures out of dark energy. And that's where basically that was the starting point of the story and where the plot line kind of went.
Were there any challenges in creating this movie, and what were they if there were?
I think always the biggest challenge is finding budget and raising the money for it, and finding the great locations and the cast. Luckily for me, this time around was based on a lot of people and friends that I already knew and was working with, and so I wrote a lot of roles specifically for them, and so that made it easier. But finding a good location was hard, and of course, just rounding up the cash to do it.
What did you most like about creating this horror movie?
It was so freeing to just be able to work in a way that, again, because I self-finance, not having to answer to anyone really apart from the storyline that, and my collaborators, like working with my DP, who's Thomas Billingsley, working with my producers, working with the cast. It was really not having to answer to anyone other than to the creative story itself.
Do you have a favorite moment from the movie?
There's so many moments that I actually really loved. I think I really loved working with Ingrid and Val together. And so the moment of her, basically when I guess it's not a spoiler, but when Flea gets her slight revenge on Willow, that whole scene, I love doing that one. That's one of my favorite scenes.
What are your favorite horror movies?
I love J horror. I love Asian horror. I love Korean thrillers. So I think things like I Saw the Devil, Audition. I still love The Eye. I still love, you know, basically Ju-on and I guess all of that J horror stuff from the 90s. I'm still a huge fan.
Why do you think the film won so many awards?
I think the film won a lot of awards because it came out the time that it did. At that point, there was a lot of Asian hate that was going around, and we were all stuck in a pandemic. And I think that when it hit, we filmed it in 2018, so it took a long time for us to finish the film. We finished it in 2020, and I think that we were in the midst of the pandemic, and I think the film felt like the pandemic for some strange reason. All the weird dreams we were all having and being sort of locked in isolation. The film has that feeling to it, and yeah, so I think that's that. I think it was the right film at the right time.
What's the most important thing to get right when writing a horror film?
I think the most important thing is that you have a heart and a center, and you're following that inner compass. Like sometimes when you're writing films, you're writing, to satisfy someone else or to satisfy, what you think the audiences will like or what you think your finance, like your distribution and your financiers want. And I think the key is that always you have to go back to what is the heart of the story. And if you're true to that and you're true to your own roots, I think you're better off. Like, what scares me? I always ask that. What scares me? What interests me? And essentially, how am I doing right by these characters?
How did you get into creating movies?
I have always loved horror from the time I was young, but it took me quite a while to get into filmmaking. I started off, as a fashion designer. I was in law school. I was actually a lawyer for many years, and I ended up producing. So I was a producer for way longer than I was at that point as a writer director. And I always wanted to do horror films. And I kept getting scripts that I didn't, they weren't great. And, I was working with directors that never got what I was trying to do. And so I think that it was one year in 2005 or 2006 that my producing career came to a grinding halt, and I was literally left with, what am I going to do? And I ended up writing my first short script for, it was called The Cabinet, and it was my first short film. And I got picked. There was only 5 projects that got picked across Canada, and my project got selected, and it was my first time writing and directing. I've never looked back since.
What is the most rewarding aspect of being involved in the film industry?
I think the thing that I love the most about being in the film industry is making films. Ultimately, the industry itself is hard. There's a lot of components that are there that are not my favorite things, but making films with my friends, and making films for audiences, and going out afterwards and actually, connecting hopefully with people who understand and get the films. That's the most rewarding thing that I can think of.
Are you inspired by any independent filmmakers, and who, if so?
Yes, I think I'm still to this day, inspired by, who I started watching as a young person, which was like, it was David Lynch, it was John Waters, it's the Coen brothers when they first started. It's that independent spirit. Jim Jarmusch, like, I love a lot of that indie filmmaking is still very much part of how I want to make things. It's a little bit guerrilla filmmaking.
What is your best advice to people who want to create films?
I think nowadays we actually have so much more access to making films, because you can use your iPhone, you can use iPads. There's good technology. You have your own edit suites on basically on your computers. Really, it's about getting life experience as a writer. The more you can actually meet people who are not just in your immediate circle, the more real stories. The way that when Willow was inspired by these female inmates, getting a chance to get outside of your little bubble in your comfort zone, the more life experience you have. Read things, watch things, and when you tell a story, be true to yourself. I think that you're not writing to basically, satisfy, whether it's money or otherwise. It's like, what kind of story do you want to hear? What kind of stories really resonate for you? I think when you go back to your heart and your core, that's when you don't go wrong.
Where can people follow you?
They can follow me on, I guess, X, which is no longer Twitter, at Opiate Pics, but I'm not really posting too much on it. Instagram, it is my cats, which are Mateo _ Sophia _ they're 2 tuxedo cats. If you look for them, that's me. And they can also look on my website, KarenLamFilms.com, although that needs updating. So.
I would like to thank Karen for the interview. For people watching, you can like, comment, share, subscribe, and whatever else you do to videos if you're watching in the future.